Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this presentation of Way of the Cross with the use of poems. I'm rather impressed that so many have turned out. I thought I'd have poemed you all out by now after all these years of using poems as readily as I do. The thing to remember about poems always is that it's not about understanding every last word. It's about a bit when we look at a painting and it leaves an impression on us. A good painting draws us in. It speaks to us the way we need speaking to at that time. A poem is like that. We're not back in our classrooms. I will give a little bit of a hint as to why I think or what to maybe look out for in each poem, but please do see this as an opportunity to just contemplate in a very different way that we're accustomed to this very significant devotion, actually. And I want to speak before we do that about the that's off. That keeps happening, you know. Just a moment. I'll go back to Way of the Cross. And this artist here, Graham Evelyn Mortimer, he began his life, he was a son of Jamaican immigrants. He went to, they brought him up Pentecostal, he went to art college. Somewhere along the way he became a Buddhist, and yet he was invited by Gloucester Cathedral. The Anglicans are much better at encouraging artists than Catholics sometimes. Gloucester Cathedral gave him an internship, and one of his projects was the stations you're going to be seeing tonight. You've got a little copy of it up front there. He sees them in a sense, I mean, this is interesting, as almost like a comic book, and he meant that in a good way. You know, it's telling a story with pictures. And what he found so amazing was that it's a universal story. And so some of the images he uses are deliberately reflecting universal human suffering, not only Christ, as it were, but it's linking universal human suffering with the suffering and redeeming death of Christ. He even wanted, and again this was a sincere hope, that these would speak to atheists, you know, not to try and convert them, but just to incorporate all good human beings in a story which has something to offer us all. So we're going to, with each station, there'll be a change of image on here. There'll be a person reading, giving the title, then reading the scripture passage allocated. Then I will give a brief little word before we hear the poem each time. Okay, so I think it's Debbie is going to read for us first, Debbie.
Condemned. And as soon it was morning, the chief priests, with the elders and scribes, and the whole council, held a consultation. And they bound Jesus and led him away and delivered him to Pilate. And Pilate asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" And he answered him, "You have said so." And the chief priests accused him of many things. And Pilate again asked him, "Have you no answer to make? See how many charges they bring against you." But Jesus made no further answer, so that Pilate wondered. So Pilate, wishing to satisfy the crowd, released for them Barabbas, and having scourged Jesus, he delivered him to be crucified.
Which is quite a distance from this image, but just to point out that you've got the traditional elements of the Christ figure, albeit in a sort of 20th century outfit, and you've also got Pilate at the back washing his hands in water, and I would imagine the other figure at the back pointing the finger of accusation would be one of the chief priests, okay? But around it are the pointing fingers, and again, pointing fingers for me always reminds me of when people point a finger at me or anybody else, and there's an accusation going on, and there's an attack going on, and there's I'm doing it to you now, only to illustrate. It's a shocking sort of representation of human, and how crowds can get caught up in these kinds of frenzies. And then you've also got the very front two cameras as well. So in the poem we're about to listen to, it comes from a Latin American context, a continent all too familiar with this story we're going to hear about a senseless brutality of executing somebody. It's a happening which belittles both or kills the person who's shot, but also, in a way, kills something inside of the executioners who are doing it at the behest, again, of the elite. It's always others who get others to do the dirty work for them. So we're going to listen to our poem.
Firing Squad by Nicolas Guillen. They're going to shoot a man whose arms are tied. 4 soldiers are ready to fire. They're 4 sullen soldiers who are also bound. Like the trussed man, they'll fell to the ground. Can you get away? I can't run. They're going to fire. I'm undone. Maybe the rifles aren't loaded. They've 6 bullets of fierce lead. Maybe they'll turn around instead. You're a fool with wool in your head. They fired. How was it they could fire? They've killed. How was it they could kill? They were 4 sullen soldiers standing on a line, and a gentleman officer gave them a sign, lowering his sword. They were 4 soldiers bound. Like the trussed man, the 4 of them fell to the ground.
Second station, burdened. When the chief priests and the officers saw him, they cried out, "Crucify him, crucify him." Pilate said to them, "Take him yourselves and crucify him, for I find no crime in him." They cried out, away with him, crucify him." Pilate said to them, "Shall I crucify your king?" The chief priests answered, "We have no king but Caesar." Then he handed him over to them to be crucified. So they took Jesus, and he went out, bearing his own cross, to the place called the Place of a Skull, which is called in Hebrew Golgotha.
poem we're going to listen to now was composed by Dietrich Bonhoeffer, the German Lutheran pastor and theologian who was involved in the plot to assassinate Hitler that failed, and as a result was himself imprisoned and then executed. It was clear that he had an impression on his jailers while he was in prison, and he spotted that. He understood, and it was again, it's this interplay between people who are doing bad things at the behest of others and having their own humanity challenged, as it were. But also that I want you to understand this as very much an act of faith by Bonhoeffer as he approaches his own death. That's why he's saying, what is my identity as I approach my death?
Who Am I by Dietrich Bonhoeffer. Who am I? They often tell me I come out of my cell calmly, cheerfully, resolutely, like a lord from his palace. Who am I? They often tell me I used to speak to my warders freely and friendly and clearly, as though it were mine to command. Who am I? They also tell me I carried the days of misfortune equably, smilingly, proudly, like one who is used to winning. Am I really then what others say of me? Or am I only what I know of myself? Restless, melancholic, and ill, like a caged bird, struggling for breath, as if hands clasped my throat, hungry for flowers, for colours, for flowers, for the songs of birds, thirsty for friendly words and human kindness, shaking with anger at fate and at the smallest sickness, trembling for friends at an infinite distance, tired and empty at praying, at thinking, at doing, drained and ready to say goodbye to it all. Who am I? This or the other? Am I one person today and another tomorrow? Am I both at once? In front of others a hypocrite, and to myself a contemptible, fretting weakling? Or is it something still in me like a battered army, running in disorder from a victory already achieved? Who am I? These lonely questions mock me. Whoever I am, you know me. I am yours, O God.
So we come to the first poem about of Jesus' falls on the way to Calvary, and each of them is significant. I think this one, again, if you were able to see it up more closely, is evidently an African slave. You've got the chains there which indicate slavery and the appalling realities that slavery brings. But the poem, I think, for me, this one I want to look out for, as I would say, is the water on which we can float when we're borne up by, we're being borne up by something, even as we fall, as it were. Something other than our own resources can lift us up.
The third station, fallen. Then Pilate took Jesus and had him scourged. And the soldiers wove a crown out of thorns and placed it on his head and clothed him in a purple cloak. And they came to him and said, "Hail, King of the Jews!" And they struck him repeatedly.
I got it wrong, Julie, so if you just pause and then go into the poem in a couple of seconds, yeah.
Where many rivers meet, by David White. All the water below me came from above. All the clouds living in the mountains gave it to the rivers, who gave it to the sea, which was their dying. And so I float on cloud become water, central sea surrounded by white mountains. The water salt, once fresh, cloud fall and stream rush, tree roots and tide bank leading to the rivers' mouths, and the mouths of the rivers sing into the sea. The stories buried in the mountains give out into the sea, and the sea remembers and sings back from the depths where nothing is forgotten.
The fourth station, mothered. Standing by the cross of Jesus were his mother and his mother's sister, Mary, the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. When Jesus saw his mother and the disciple whom he loved standing near, he said to his mother, "Woman, behold your son." Then he said to the disciple, "Behold your mother." And from that hour, the disciple took her to his own home.
Again, this is a difficult one to sort of see for where you are, but I want to put this is Mary here with her. You can just see the front of her face there. But you see Jesus' hand gently touching his mother's face. And again, I just think it's just beautiful in and of itself to just, in his suffering, Jesus actually reached out like how a child with their suffering reaches out for their mum. That's, yeah. So, but also in the poem, it reminds us that at the beginning of Jesus' life, the presentation in the temple, Simeon foretold the sufferings that would come Mary's way as she witnessed the suffering of her child. So this is, this poem actually relates to the beginning of Jesus' life and the suffering that had always been a part of his story. So, yeah.
From Madonna and Child by John F. Dean. They had gone on beyond the city, her pains causing her to cry out at times, and he, hurt and ignorant and distraught, led the reluctant ass towards the shelter of hills, a low blue-black sky, stars sharp already as nails, a chill wind blowing. He would lay down among the scrub, if necessary, the donkey blanket beneath her, water from a stream to help the cleansing. There would be night birds, jackals, perhaps, and snakes. The great howl of the ass frightened him, and he held the woman tightly. Against the cruelties of Sheol and the unshareable pangs of a full pregnancy, till the gathering dark drew them to a small fire. In the limestone hills, a cave, small shelter against the winds, and crude, half-drunk shepherds gobbing at a fire. They heard small life sounds, the shifting of a flock. And she cried again, as the lost do, against the pain.
the fifth station, helped. And they compelled a passerby, Simon of Cyrene, who was coming in from the country, the father of Alexander and Rufus, to carry his cross.
Just briefly on this picture again, the thing that kind of struck me was, as well as supporting the cross with one arm, Simeon has another arm wrapped around Jesus's shoulders, that human reaching out again in the midst of suffering, which remains always such a beautiful thing to witness. And in the poem, this is a lovely one. This is two lovers been in bed, and one's fallen asleep and one's had the arm around the other, and they wake up and the arm is dead. And but it's just that bearing, the love, that kind of just loving people. Just listen out for that.
The Limb That Carried Everything by Michael Simmons Roberts. I wake to find my arm curled like a lame wing across me, a collapsed embrace with her, the one I held for so long, gone. And I hear her downstairs, coaxing slattered sun between blinds. Dead arm, are you rehearsing loss? Or rather, have I carried contraband? A child, a name, a landscape, through light years of dark, and now, slug limb, you rest while other sleepers bear it. A relay through endless rooms? I'm glad, in lieu of weight, to have this ache and weakness.
The sixth station, tended. He had no form or comeliness that we should look at him, and no beauty that we should desire him. He was despised and rejected by men, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. And as one from whom men would hide their faces, he was despised, and we esteemed him not.
The figure here of Veronica, you'll note, has on her arm the Red Cross associated with the Red Cross organisation, clearly evoking here Veronica as an example or representative of all those humanitarian agencies who go into dark and difficult and stressful places and reach out to others with care. And again, in thinking of Veronica, we pay honour to those who reach out to others in distress, regardless really of the risks to themselves.
The Ballad of Just and While by Rebecca Elson. Although I am about to drop, I'll just do this before I stop. I'll dust the stairs, put out the bin, I'll bring the still wet washing in. A woman's work is never done. I'll finish something I've begun. But one thing's not enough for me, while with I could be doing 3. And just's a wedge to squeeze in more. Excuse me, I'll just sweep the floor. It's just the same at work as home. I calculate, I write, I phone. But things cannot go on this way. I think I've done enough today. Let while be something outside me, the turning earth, the waving sea. Let just be me upon some beach, just sorting pebbles within reach.
The seventh station, fallen. If God is with us, who can be against us? God, who did not spare his own Son, but handed him over for us all, how will he not also give us everything else along with him? What will separate us from the love of Christ? Will anguish or distress, or persecution or famine, or nakedness or peril, or the sword? No, in all these things we conquer overwhelmingly through him who has loved us. For I am convinced that neither death nor life, nor angels nor principalities, nor present things, nor future things, nor powers, nor height, nor depth, nor any other creature will be able to separate us from the love of God in Christ Jesus our Lord.
This one, you'll notice the familiar image of concentration camp victim, and this is doubly the case because he's wearing the yellow Star of David, that image of a faith that was so twisted and turned to become again trying to turn it into an emblem of shame. But this poem we're going to listen to, again, I mean, as I see this is a poem in a way of gratitude. We're imagining someone who's been unwell. It might be mental health, it might be an ongoing condition, it might indeed be a terminal illness that they're facing. But there's gratitude that the medication they're currently receiving is allowing them, again, having fallen into illness, to rise again and experience as if for the first time or with renewed vigor. And again, a lot of people say this, you know, when they've been diagnosed as something terminal, they often find life becomes richer and more vibrant, and the colours and the things. And I think this, in a way, is an expression of gratitude, expressing something of the experience of the joy of life restored.
Back by Jane Kenyon. We try a new drug, a new combination of drugs, and suddenly I fall into my life again, like a ball picked up by a storm, then dropped 3 valleys and 2 mountains away from home. I can find my way back, I know. I will recognize the store where I used to buy milk and gas. I remember the house and the barn, the rake, the blue cups and plates, the Russian novels I loved so much, and the black silk nightgown that he once thrust into the toe of my Christmas stocking.
The 8th station, mourned. And there followed him a great multitude of the people and of women who bewailed and lamented him. But Jesus, turning to them, said, "Daughters of Jerusalem, do not weep for me, but weep for yourselves and for your children. For behold, the days are coming when they will say, 'Blessed are the barren, and the wombs that never bore, and the breasts that never gave suck.' Then they will begin to say to the mountains, 'Fall on us,' and to the hills, 'Cover us.' For if they do this when the wood is green, what will happen when it is dry?"
What I find striking about this image of the women of Jerusalem mourning for Jesus is they're mourning for Jesus, but they're reaching out to him just as like their sister did, reached out to just touch the hem of his garment. It's as if, in a way, they've got very mixed emotions on this day. They're still wanting to, well, there's still Christ's life there. They're trying to drag something out of him as a little bit sort of, you do sense in Jesus' response to that, you know, that you're trying to get them to refocus on the future and indeed to think about their children and to look beyond this immediate sign of loss and maybe to have a renewed sense of trust in the future, which I think, again, this poem resonates with that.
Early Darkness by Louise Gluck. How can you say, "Earth should give me joy"? Each thing born is my burden. I cannot succeed with all of you. And you would like to dictate to me, you would like to tell me who among you is most valuable, who resembles me. And you hold up as an example the pure life, the detachment you struggle to achieve. How can you understand me when you cannot understand yourselves? Your memory is not powerful enough. It will not reach back far enough. Never forget you are my children. You are not suffering because you touched each other, but because you were born, because you required life separate from me.
The 9th station, fallen. I am overwhelmed by a burden beyond my strength. I am stooped and deeply bowed. All day I go about mourning. My heart shudders, my strength forsakes me. The very light of my eyes has failed. Friends and companions shun my pain. My neighbours stand far off. Those who seek my life lay snares for me. They seek my misfortune. They speak of ruin. They plot treachery all the day. I am very near to falling. My pain is with me always. Come quickly to help me, my Lord and my salvation.
The figure in our third image of the fall is evidently a soldier in his uniform with his equipment around his waist and his rifle cast aside as he falls in death. Again, a reminder of the futility, really, of the way we seek to resolve things, or worse still, impose our will on others, when the people who are behind so much of humanity's continued suffering. And the poem, in a way, is quite trivial in comparison to those kind of falls. This is the falling into a bed of nettles. The nettles are coming out now, so be careful. You might find yourself. But I just love the way this describes that, the lingering after effects of the fall into the nettles. It just evokes that beautifully, and it's just this sense that our falls in life, they do sort of leave a bit of an imprint which we carry with us, but not one we cannot no longer live with.
Nestlefuzz by Mark Payak. I fell into a nettle pit, face down in serrated leaves and black stems. Up close, I could see the nettle hairs, a white fuzz round their edges like a constant hum. But the only sound was the slow laugh of a crow and wind like applause through the ash trees. You can only hear a nettle through the skin. Each hair triggers a finger like a tuning fork. And I stood up with tinnitus shivering in every muscle.
The 10th station, naked. When the soldiers had crucified Jesus, they took his garments and made 4 parts, one for each soldier, also his tunic. But the tunic was without seam, woven from top to bottom. So they said to one another, "Let us not tear it, but cast lots for it to see whose it shall be." This was to fulfill the scripture. They parted my garments among them, and for my clothing they cast lots.
We associate nakedness with shame. Certainly that would have been the intention of those who were stripping Jesus of his garments, and how many times again that has been done just to as an act of torture and humiliation and shame. But what the stripping of Jesus reminds us of is that human dignity is never surrendered to evil. Human dignity is God's way of looking at us, and God never looks upon us with the eyes of shame. Human dignity, even in the midst, and often expressed most valiantly and in a strange way, beautifully through suffering, is a God-given grace, reminding us that everything about us, the good times and the difficult times, the joyful and the deeply sad, still retain a potential to be at God's service and to glorify his gift of life to us.
Everything by Mary Oliver. I want to make poems that say right out, Plainly, what I mean, that don't go looking for the laces of elaboration, puffed sleeves. I want to keep close and use often words like heavy, heart, joy, soon, and to cherish the question mark and her bold sister, the dash. I want to write with quiet hands. I want to write while crossing the fields that are fresh with daisies and everlasting and the ordinary grass. I want to make poems while thinking of the bread of heaven and the cup of astonishment. Let them be songs in which nothing is neglected, not a hope, not a promise. I want to make poems that look into the earth and the heavens and see the unseeable. I want them to honour both the heart of faith and the light of the world. The gladness that says, without any words, everything.
The 11th station, nailed. And when they came to the place which is called the Skull, there they crucified him, and the criminals, one on the right and one on the left. And Jesus said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And they cast lots to divide his garments.
Perhaps the simplest image of all in this series, the one hand with the one nail cut through it into the wood of the cross. And the poem we're going to listen to is a short one, but it echoes, I think, that earlier poem in which we had that image of floating on the water. Was it the first one for Fallen? That floating on the water is sort of evoked in this this poem too. The floating is kind of, again, it symbolises trust. You know, I can remember when, I think it was my dad, you know, the first time let go of in the water of the swim baths. And I went to the bottom. No, I didn't. I did trust what I was being told, and I floated. And again, it's a symbol of faith for us.
Action, Denise Levertov. I can lay down that history. I can lay down my glasses. I can lay down my imaginary lists of what to forget and what must be done. I can shake the sun out of my eyes and lay everything down on the hot sand and cross the whispering threshold and walk right into the clear sea and float there. My long hair floating and fishes vanishing all around me. Deep water. Little by little, one comes to know the limits and depths of power.
The 12th station, death. It was now about the 6th hour, and there was darkness over the whole land until the 9th hour, while the sun's light failed, and the curtain of the temple was torn in two. Then Jesus, crying with a loud voice, said, "Father, into your hands I commit my spirit." And having said this, he breathed his last.
The poem we're about to listen to presents a horrible scene, a truly horrible death of a child, and the impact on those who are just having to witness and try to bring as much relief as they can. It was, from Kabul, Afghanistan, in our own lifetime, and of course this is a child, the son of parents, and I think again of Jesus, the son of Mary, God's own son, but in this poem, despite the horrific occasion, there are two beautiful lines. One, that it is a birth, not an ending, and again, what does that mean? Again, I'm not going to answer that question. But secondly, and the silence sang of him.
Angel of Dying by Gwyneth Lewis. A young boy dying on a ward in Kabul wouldn't stop singing, made music from screens, wouldn't sleep, wouldn't drink, but chanted dreams in ferocious head notes. He frightened us all, but held his dying like a torch of flame for us to follow. Arches leapt darkly overhead, threw shadows over us. He led on past comfort, past reason or blame, with the terrible energy of the dead, whose death is more life than flesh can bear, a birth, not an ending. This truth tore the living to pieces. Then silence sang of him instead. I've never forgotten him. No, don't ask about dying. How to live is the task.
The 13th station, cradled. Now there was a virtuous and righteous man named Joseph, who went to Pilate and asked for the body of Jesus. Pilate permitted it, so Joseph came and took his body. Nicodemus also came. They took the body of Jesus and bound it with burial cloths, along with spices, according to the Jewish burial custom.
Again, here we have the scene of what we know as the Pietà, Mary cradling the body of her dead child. And this next poem again touches on a very, very tragic reality for too many people, the loss of their own child. And it's a very vivid description of this scene of a young boy who's always looked beyond the garden, the safe place, always wanted to go there, and they've managed at the early stage of his life to hold him back and protect him. But one day, their parents' nightmare, the child gets away and goes, and they find his body and the dead. Okay. But even in that, I hope you'll see that there's some consoling images for the parents, that there's a sense that the boy has died doing or achieving his life's goal. That's how it was a very innocent and short-term and dangerous goal, sadly, but it's kind of trying to find comfort in something, I suppose, in such horrible circumstances. But there's even a hint that the child has got a smile on his face because he's got to where he wants to be.
Death of a Child by Lawrence Sale. It lay beyond the tidy garden ways, an endless world where wicked berries gleamed precisely in the seasonless disorder, with leaves like flags hoisted to dizzy treetops, cables of creeper a foot thick, a place where nothing was settled, nothing tamely focused to prim gravel or a few labelled roses. He noticed that this area shared with others the name of No, selected by his parents. The parents, who later blamed themselves, smiled as he tested boundaries through 4 summers. The potting shed was good while it lasted. The trees easily bore his weight, and when those palled, it was time to help him make his own small garden, a replica of his father's, 10 feet square, with regular rows and a space to walk between. He liked it when they knelt to dig his garden, seeing behind it the great space No. In the 5th year, beneath the splaying orchids, the opposite view had equal fascination. Looking back, he could barely define the zone of barren ground in which his parents stooped, peering, calling, anxious to know where he was. But he was No, all made of shiny tubers, with berry eyes and skin smooth as leaves, twigs for fingers, and a dark mind. In delight he shouted his name, fled down the unfenced ways, and when breathless he paused, it seemed to him he stood at his own true threshold, a cool clearing of grass and lily flowers, at whose still centre bamboo had formed a graceful canopy. The light still held, he had only to cross. From the first step forward, he felt the ground give way in recognition. Boldly, with joy, he trod into the reed-covered lake. They found him there, his eyes bright, staring beyond their world.
Station 14, Entombed. And Joseph took the body and wrapped it in a clean linen shroud and laid it in his own new tomb, which he had hewn in the rock, and he rolled a great stone to the door of the tomb and departed.
Again, reminding ourselves that the artist was wanting to evoke universal human themes in his art. Do you note how the cross here has become a path in a cemetery with these very neat ranks of burial stones, headstones there? It's again, I think it's a very creative sense of the burial of Christ. You know, our own death and the end of our lives are united with that, interred in the ground or wherever, but with the same promise with which Christ was placed in his tomb. Now the poem is going to be a poem by Sean Hewitt, and that's why it's beautiful. We've got his uncle Adrian to read this poem for us today. The family are rightly very proud of, as his grandma is, of Sean's poetry. And this poem again, it's an again, those who've read any of his work, and it's challenging poems, but this is a beautiful. Sean loves being in nature, and this is him a bit like a little boy. And again, it's water. He kind of is going through this forest, chasing after his beloved, as it were, and he dives into the water, and the water lifts him up. It's all this business about water and being lifted up. There's that beautiful phrase in one of the hymns, the everlasting arms. You know, this comes to my mind as all these images of us floating on the water. And if you think about it, Easter time, we bless the water of the baptismal font. All these images kind of come together of the sadness of loss, but the being lifted up even in the midst of sorrow. So over to Adrian.
Action by Sean Hewitt. Between trees, I go 1 foot after the other, arriving on instinct between roots, dodging with white feet the white slug swelled on forest light. And you disappear ahead of slanting pines, my pale step padding on this sloping peat path that sinks like a trapdoor underfoot. And then I leap. I love to plunge through the black glass of the lake to make it echo with my body, feeling the water's cold resistance. For a long moment, I plumb its dark core, and then its arms rush in and lift me back to the light.
The artist painted a 15th station, which has become more common practice these days. But remember, he was painting this as a Buddhist, and the Buddhists have no real concept of an afterlife in some respects, other than reincarnation. But again, he felt it was so important to have this story with the Christian future, as it were, as part of it. And the image here was inspired by a story of a father and a son who again were being lined up as we began with our first poem in front of a firing squad. This was a Nazi firing squad, and the father standing with his son about to be executed. And as the soldiers lifted their guns, the father took his boy's hand and pointed him to the skies to the stars to distract him. But also I think of this in terms of God pointing Abraham to the stars and saying, look, the future is as much yours as it is mine. So this is a symbol of the resurrection through every act of parental love for their child is a symbol of the resurrection to me in this most beautiful image. And I'm going to read, if I may, for this one, with no scripture passage, because we'll leave that to Easter. But this is Alive by the Welsh priest poet R.S. Thomas. It is alive. It is you, God. Looking out, I can see no death. The earth moves, the sea moves, the wind goes on its exuberant journeys. Many creatures reflect you. The flowers, your color, the tides, the precision of your calculations. There is nothing too ample for you to overflow. Nothing so small that your workmanship is not revealed. I listen, and it is you speaking. I find the place where you lay warm. At night, if I waken, there are the sleepless conurbations of the stars. The darkness is the deepening shadow of your presence. The silence, a process, the metabolism of the being of love. So there we have it. We've run over an hour. I hope that hasn't caused any problems for any of you, but I do want to speak to all those who graced us with their reading of those poems, all beautifully recited, bringing through the aspects we most needed to hear. I'm sure they have been trying to record this as well, incidentally, so hopefully, if I've done it right, it will appear on our parish YouTube page if you want to invite others to take a look at it. I can provide additional copies of the Psalms if you wish, and I will try and make that available as something you can pull down off the parish website. And thank you very much indeed for your presence, and I hope you found it a helpful part of your Lenten devotions.